There we go. Hey, we've got audio. That's amazing. Welcome to Incognito TV. Sorry for the hiccup. I have no idea what OBS was doing or what it was thinking. Sometimes it's just like in real life. Your technology friend or your real life friend, you don't know what they're thinking, you don't know what they're doing, but you explore that relationship. You hit the buttons, you see what happens, and then you might understand. And in this case, it appeared that my camera was not in webcam mode, but was set to do direct to SD card recording. So OBS was not picking me up. These things, they happen. So what are we doing here today? Well, this is episode 3 of Cheap Love, where we explore the relationships, the interplay, the dynamics between various economic assets and actions that we could take in our StarCraft game. And we look at, relationships between unit compositions as well, but lately we've been focusing on the economy. Why? Well, essentially, StarCraft 2 is an economy game. Yes, it's a strategy game, and yes, there is combat, and there's tactics, and all of that. But the core of it is controlling and employing your resources. So, in this segment, this stream, this program, whatever you want to call it, we dive into the economic relationships. And to help us set the mood for exploring relationships, we are going to be picking back up where we left off in Leah's seduction. Leah so far is a very interesting character, full of depth, longings and struggles, passions not yet fulfilled. She's been prioritizing her career over her personal life, but she just met a man with a great ass. It wasn't too round, it was just round enough. And we're going to pick up on, where Leah and this man that she met, whose name is Gianni Rinaldi, we're going to pick up with that and see where that relationship goes before we dive into our StarCraft analysis and experimentation and interplay of economic assets and relationships. So where were we with Leah? Okay. So, she had just met Gianni in the hallway after dropping her pamphlet to the symposium that she was going to attend. There's always a symposium, isn't there? The brief encounter required a trip to the ladies' room so she could catch her breath and regroup. Still trembling, Leah went inside a stall and leaned against the locked door. Something had just happened out there, and she was unable to get her wits around it. Of course he was sexy. Too sexy. As if that were possible. But there's something in his look. Something she saw in his eyes that she couldn't decipher. Yet it had shaken her to the core. Making an effort to breathe and calm down, Leah didn't move for several minutes. Feels like me when I'm under pressure in the StarCraft games. When she did, she made an effort to rearrange her long, honey blonde hair and dab at what little makeup she'd worn. Very little good it did. Leah still looked shaken. She'd find a place in the back of the meeting room so Gianni would be in front of her. That way he wouldn't see her, but she could watch him. Now, that's just a little bit creepy, isn't it? I mean, is it just me? Or is that hot? I don't know. See, my gut instinct tells me that that's a little creepy. But you can't You can't always judge how you love or whatever. And I'm not going to because I don't know Leah. So where do we go from here? Good plan, she said, and it worked. Because as soon as Leah stepped into the enormous conference room and secured a chair as far back as she could manage, she spotted him. Gianni was on stage, obviously one of the presenters. Then it dawned on her. Gianni Rinaldi, the owner of GR Showroom. He owned one of the biggest showrooms in New York, standing out among the thousands of showrooms. Pretty impressive. What was even more impressive was the way he looked in the dusted rose dress shirt tucked into his sleek gray slacks, making her want to grab the silver tie he wore and haul him close for a kiss. Which is exactly how I feel when I think about things like getting upgrades and getting expansions in my infrastructure. I really want that next expansion. I want to grab it by the tie and pull it in and get all them resources. Last week we talked about expansions and how they affect your economy in various stages of the game. We did a little experiment. We wanted to figure out how much of an effect a second base would have on a 10-minute marine push. And it was a very specific kind of scenario. Our scenario was we wanted to build as many marines as possible by the 10-minute mark, and we explored various routes that we could take to try to get there. And what we had found was that a one-base economy and a two-base economy didn't perform much differently within that time frame and that stated goal. We ended up on the two-base economy, we ended up having lots of barracks, and about this, more, but about the same number of Marines. And then we explored the idea of using reactors. Right, we're going to use another resource. We're going to introduce a second party into this relationship, and that was gas. For reactors. So the idea with a reactor is that it's cheaper, it builds faster, it keeps your base cleaner, and you can then put out 2 Marines at a time versus 1 on a single structure. Okay, so what was interesting there in our experiment was that it didn't really result in having more Marines by 10 minutes as compared to more naked barracks. There's some stuff happening there. And it has to do with time, right? Because you're putting the reactor on the barracks isn't actually producing anything for a certain amount of time. When the reactor is done, then it starts to catch up with itself as more time goes by, okay? So we've been just exploring that, doing some experiments, checking it out, trying to make some conclusions about how the economy works, because ultimately we want to understand this game in depth. We want to understand StarCraft on a level that we can go into a game, we can see what our opponent is doing, and understand what they're doing from an economic point of view so that we can make the most of that situation with our own economy. We can make small adjustments that are outside of standard build orders, and then we can further develop an edge over our opponent. If we don't have a good grasp of the fundamentals of the economy, we're not going to be able to make those kinds of decisions. So, this is all about discovering some of those fundamentals. And along the way, we might get some things wrong. Empiricism is not always infallible, right? Your experiments have to be accurate, and you've got to execute, the same sort of thing more than once to really get a good, accurate, and precise measurement. But we're not trying to be scientists right now. What we're trying to do is get a sense, and we accept that in the process of getting a sense of the economy, we're also going to make some errors in calculation and some errors in judgment, and that's okay. That's part of the process. We're going to learn from that too. So today, today what we're going to look at is first some very, very, very basic fundamentals. I mean, even more fundamental than our barracks experiment. The first thing I want to do is to confirm what I've heard, right? Because I watch a lot of StarCraft, I listen to a lot of analysis, I watch a lot of tutorials, I get a constant feed, a constant foaming and frothing up of all this data and information and opinion on StarCraft. And no matter who you're listening to, you should always do your own verification. Now, I'm not saying to not trust everything, but there's also value to be gained in going through the verification process yourself, because now you can experience it and then you can move on and implement it. At the same time, you're also doing some fact checking yourself, okay? So no matter what you're doing or who you're listening to or who you're learning from, check it out yourself. It's okay. It doesn't mean you don't trust them, because you probably do, and over time you're going to figure out who you gravitate toward as far as getting your StarCraft information or your coaching, right? My intention here is to provide an environment, right? That's all I'm trying to do. A lot of it is focused on my own shortcomings as a player, so that other players who are like me can have somewhere safe to hang out with somebody that is thinking about the game possibly differently than they are, and can help guide them toward the resources to improve should they desire improvement. Okay? So today, what is that most basic thing that we're going to start out with? I want to start out with workers, right? Now, every race, as I understand it, their worker mechanics are just a little bit different. So I'm going to be focusing on Terran. We can also do others. That's possible. We'll see where this goes. Just like, I'm sure Leah is not certain where her relationship with Gianni is going to go, or if there's going to be one. All she knows is that there's this very attractive man that she happened to bump into, who's now on stage at the symposium that she's attending. She's very fond of his looks and his success. Clearly something to keep in mind as you're checking out your workers. In StarCraft. Checking out your workers in StarCraft. Alright, so we're loading up the game. Initializing them maps. Loading. Flash loading. More. It's taking a little while. That's alright. What are we going to do, though? Okay. So, we're going to start a game, and at 1 minute, we're going to pause the game. And we're going to do nothing else. Okay? I want to confirm that SCVs mine 40 minerals a minute. The reason I want to confirm that isn't because I don't trust the person that I heard say this, actually. I just need to confirm that we're talking about game time and not real time. I don't know if you've noticed this or not. If you're new to StarCraft or the ladder, or just new to thinking about the game in any kind of depth, if you're playing on the ladder, you're playing at faster speed, right? And that does not appear to be real life time. So when it says a 10-minute attack or something like, it says 10 minutes on your game timer, that 10 minutes has not yet actually gone by, is what I've seemed to have observed. So I just am going to confirm that my SCVs mine 40 minerals a minute per SCV in 1 minute of game time. It's going to be quick, and we're just going to do that right now, right? Because if we know that, then we know a whole lot of things about the rest of our economic relationships. Okay? And there may be some slight variations depending on, the layout of the minerals. Like some of them are staggered, some of them aren't. How the AI does your split. I'm not concerned about that. I just generally want to see here how many minerals we have and demonstrate the simple kind of calculations that we can do to figure stuff out. So we're going to add an AI. Okay, very easy, whatever, doesn't matter. And start the game at faster speed, the speed of the ladder. I don't have my headphones on because I don't need to see anything. Or, whoa, I don't need to hear anything. We're not going to do anything, we're just going to hit pause at 1 minute in. This is really taxing me right now. It's hardcore. Alright, so there we go. We got 6 workers on the mineral line. We're 8 seconds into the game, and the minerals, they be coming in. Oh my. Alright. Whoa, really starting to pile up now. Almost have enough for a barracks, except we need a supply depot. Not going to do that. We're just hanging out. We're halfway through. And we're going to see how many minerals we have after 1 minute of game time, and then we're just going to do some easier arithmetics. Some maths, if you will. Because I want to know what the relationship between SCVs and income happens to be. And boom, 1 minute. Alright, 6 SCVs, 285 minerals. Okay. I'm not the guy that's going to do that math in my head. I'm going to go ahead and grab a calculator. Whoa, okay. Hello, computer. I would like you to calculate this for me. Alright. So, we've got 285 minerals. 285. And we have 6 SCVs. Okay. So, we're going to figure out how many minerals each SCV collected in that 60 seconds. Okay. 47.5. Alright. So, the word on the street was that SCVs mine 40 minerals a minute. Our little experiment got us 47.5. And I guarantee that if we rerun that several times, we're going to get slightly different results. We do it on different mineral patches, we're going to get slightly different results. Just based on stuff. Okay, so as a general rule, I think we can comfortably say 40 minerals a minute per SCV is about right. Okay, so if we have 16 SCVs on our mineral line, right, times 40, that's 640 minerals per minute. Okay. What can we do with data like that? We can do all kinds of things. It's this kind of data that starting with it, you can actually go into the area of doing your own build orders from scratch, right? If you don't have this piece of information, you're guessing about creating a build order, right? And one of the things that I really want to do, and we're going to have to do this on a show, I think on a Brain and Body, actually, we're going to do this on a show, but I'm going to have to prepare for it. Whoop, excuse me, things are happening to my eyeball. Just put in my contacts not too long ago. Alright, we're good. I think on a upcoming episode of Brain and Body, I'm going to do some prep work, and we're going to create a build order totally from scratch. And it's probably going to be a terrible build order, but that's okay because we are learning about the game at its most fundamental levels, right? Now, if you don't want to invest your time in this, then don't, okay? There's a lot of work that's already been done, right? There's a lot of knowledge that's already been gathered and condensed into here's a good thing to do, go do that thing, and you know what? You'll be all right. If you want to get into it though, like really understand, for example, why these build orders work the way they do, why they're so efficient, what goes into optimizing, then starting from the beginning, starting at the basics is the way to go, right? You're not going to like be very good at calculus having no background in arithmetic, right? And I mean adding and subtracting, multiplying and dividing. It's like there's certain knowledge that's built upon other knowledge, right? And then you make a little knowledge sandwich. Knowledge sandwich. Right? So here we're going to be getting our, our flour so that we can make some bread. Right? So what can we do knowing that 16 SCVs on a mineral line produces 640 minerals a minute? Well, let's take a look at some other things in game. All right? Let's take a look at, barracks. We'll start there with Terran. Okay? It's our unit of production. Our most basic units that we can produce besides SCVs. So we're going to unpause. We're going to get a supply depot down, and we're going to build a barracks, and then we're going to pause it again, and we're going to look at some data about barracks units. Okay? So we're just going through the process of discovery. Okay, this is different than a lot of other ways you might learn, right? You might read, or you might listen, or you might draw pictures and graphs. The process of learning here that I'm talking about is the process of discovery, right? How do we pick things apart to find out what it's all about? Rather than being told and just having that knowledge, what we want to do is build an experience, right? The experience of deconstructing the game, all right? So we're doing that at a very basic level right now. So let's take a look at a barracks.
Sure thing.
All right, we're going to get that barracks. And it says 10 out of 65. Okay? So about a minute of game time. A little more, but about a minute of game time to build a barracks. Huh. A barracks costs 150 minerals. And we're mining 40 minerals per SCV. If we have 16 SCVs, we're doing 640, right? So we've got the capability of producing several barracks at a time. How many? Right? Let's do that math. 640 divided by 150. So at maximum, we could produce 4 barracks at a time. All right? There we go. We've discovered a little bit about what a fully saturated economy, a fully saturated mineral line can produce. Okay? All right. Go back into the game. So at best, we can make 4 barracks simultaneously. If you ever wanted to do that, that is possible within a minute. And that's really what I mean. I don't mean simultaneously. I mean you can build 4 barracks per that minute of income, right? So you'd have to say you'd have to like float a bit out your barracks, right? We're not talking about things that you're necessarily going to do in game, but we are looking at things to help us understand the fundamental mechanics of our economy. All right. Okay, so let's look at some of these units. Right? Train a Marine. That's 1 supply, 50 minerals, and I believe that little green icon that looks like a clock is our timer, right? So 25 game seconds. So let's see here. You could probably get about 2.5 Marines per minute. All right? 2.5 Marines per minute is 125 minerals per minute. All right? So every time you add on a barracks and you put a Marine in production, you're decreasing your margin, right? You're bringing in 640 minerals per minute. Now, when you queue up those barracks, you're going to have less left over, right? So you're going to be floating less, you're going to be spending your money, and you're going to be utilizing those resources. Is something that I talk about all the time. Is spending, spending, spending. You want to spend. The questions become, how do we want to spend, right? Okay, you can see a Reaper. This is how you find this information if you've never looked for it, right? It's 50 minerals, 50 gas, 45-second build time, also 1 supply. Okay, now we get into the Marauder, which we'll call, you know, tier 2 unit, kind of. You need a tech lab to build it, so you got to spend some money to unlock it. 100 minerals, 25 gas, 2 supply, and a 30-second build time. Okay. So in terms of time, you're going to be able to build 2 Marines faster than you can build 2 Marauders, right? 25 seconds, 30 seconds. So 25 and 25 is 50, 30 and 30 is 60. So again, you can produce 2 Marauders per minute at a cost of 100 minerals and 25 gas. Alright, and now there's an added cost here. This is the hidden cost. Okay? The hidden cost is that the Marauder is taking up 2 supply rather than the 1 supply of a Marine. Now, that's a really interesting thing to think about, right? These are like the sort of things you might run into if you were to try to operate a business, right? There's, you know, you have your very obvious costs, right? You've got to pay your employees, you've got to pay for a building and your work materials, you know, computers and pens and pencils and paper if you're in that kind of business, right? Those are sort of the obvious costs, right? And then there's costs that are more hidden, like, well, there's a cost to hiring somebody. And I don't just mean employing somebody to go find your employee, right? But there is actually a cost to train them. There is a cost to fire them when they don't work out, which adds to the cost of the next replacement, right? So not everything is always obvious. Having that 2 supply requirement is an additional burden on your supply depots, okay? So rather than consuming, let's see, we said we could get about 2.5 Marines out a minute, right? So that's about 2.5 supply per minute, right? With Marauders, we're talking about 4 supply per minute, right? Which means you're going to have to build supply depots more often, which means you're going to be spending 100 minerals on a supply depot more often, which means you need more income up with that, right? All right, here we go. We're looking at the Ghost, okay? The Ghost is 200 minerals and 100 gas. And again, 2 supply, 40-second build time. With the exception of, nothing coming out of your barracks is going to take more than 45 seconds to build. The Reaper is the longest to construct. All right, so cool. We've got some information. We have some variables. We can do some math. We even from here we can start to construct things that look like builds. All right. Now, how does gas come into play, right? How does this factor into our economic relationships? What am I giving up to get gas, and what am I getting out of gas? Right? Okay, so we already know that our SCVs mine about 40 minerals per minute. In our particular example, we got closer to 50, but it doesn't really matter. We're just gonna call it 40. So 3 of them is 120 minerals per minute, right? And what you want on your refineries, you want, at least for maximum saturation, you want 3 SCVs mining gas. So you're giving up the potential or the opportunity of 120 minerals per minute for that gas. Now, what are we getting out of it? Well, we're getting tech, and we're getting, potentially upgrades. Things that multiply our effectiveness, or hopefully our hope is that they're multiplying our effectiveness, right? Is a Marauder, just because it exists, going to make your army better? Not necessarily, okay? Not necessarily. Now, most of the time it is, because of composition of your opponent's forces, right? But, let's think about it. What does a Marauder accomplish against a bunch of Zerglings, other than being a meat shield, right? Because the Marauder is tankier, it's got more hit points, it shoots slower. So it's not like a great unit to kill Zerglings. A Marine is much better. Matter of fact, the Marine is one of the most efficient units in the game as far as bang for buck is concerned. Its DPS is really great, especially with Stim, right? So there. Now we're starting to talk about some things with gas, right? When you can get something like Stim, you are multiplying the effectiveness of your Marines, at least for a certain amount of time. And then you start to add in things like Medivacs, which extend the period of time that your Marines can be extends the period of time that you can maintain that multiplier effect, right? Because Stim takes health away. The Medivacs replenish that health at some rate, and it will extend the life of the Marine and allow you to Stim more often, right? So gas kind of, is designed to multiply the effectiveness. Now, working that out all on your own as a starting thing is going to be kind of difficult. Okay? So that's why we're doing these basic things. We're looking at minerals, barracks, Marines, thinking about how one decision, like getting gas in this particular case, if we get an early gas, like a Reaper build, any sort of Reaper fast expand build where you're getting gas at 12, immediately saturating it fully as soon as it's constructed, you're now saying, I'm going to give up 120 minerals per minute. And I believe that expense is worth it for the ability to have very mobile scouting that, can stay alive, right? There's some longevity to my Reaper if I'm not dirtling up my micro, right? I'm making that sort of bet. And that's a pretty solid bet in most games, okay? So I'm not trying to challenge the norms here, but just to illustrate the sort of decisions that are being made in a build, right? On a very, very basic level. So, this is cool. I'm having fun. Okay. So we also said that we could build 4 barracks per minute on a 16 SCV economy, because that's 640 minerals per minute. Alright? Let's check in with Leah. Let's see where things are going on in her front. Let's see where the symposium takes her. Leah tried to recall if she'd seen pictures of him before. Maybe, but if she had, the photograph hadn't done him justice. The shirt clung to his muscled arms and chest, leaving no doubt that he frequented the gym. Her eyes lingered over his narrow waist and hips, and it took more strength than she had to keep her imagination from running wild. The presentation began, but Leah only had eyes for one man. The others could have been talking about an upcoming trip to the moon for all she knew. The speeches did little to distract her, and she knew she'd leave with her notepad blank. The only words she wrote were Gianni Rinaldi. It was if writing his name down confirmed that she had actually met him. Aww, that's so cute. My goodness. That is so cute. Oh boy. Okay, so we're talking about the relationships between our workers and our economy. We've determined that our SCVs mine somewhere between 40 to 50 minerals per minute. And at 16 SCVs, which is the highest efficiency, we're getting 640 minerals per minute. Now, I want to talk a moment about what it means to be efficient. Okay? And there's a lot of confusion about the word efficiency pretty much everywhere I go, whether in business or in StarCraft or just in casual conversation. The idea of efficiency is a little bit lost. I mean, we generally understand that something that's efficient is better. It probably is happening faster or for less money or less investment, right? And all of those things are kind of true, but we really need to really boil down what efficiency means, and it's simple. It means profit. Okay? The most profitable that you can the most profitable scenario that you can create, right? And what does that mean? Okay, it simply means that we're getting more out than what we put in. Okay, so when I say that 16 SCVs is the most efficient compared to 17, 18, 19, or 20, 21, 22, 23, or 24 or less, what am I really trying to say is, well, after that 16th SCV, each SCV, yes, it adds to your income rate up until a point, and between the 16th and 24, each one that you add on, its effectiveness is reduced, right? Its impact to your overall rate of income is lower than the ones before it, right? This is diminishing returns, right? And then once you're over 24, then you just have SCVs sitting around not doing anything. They will literally wait in line, and there's no point in them being there. They're adding nothing. So when I say that the 16 is the most efficient, it's because we're getting the most profitability for the cost of creating those SCVs. We're also incorporating, to a small degree, the idea of opportunity cost, meaning that rather than adding more SCVs to this mineral line, we could be doing things like making Marines, Marauders, Medevacs, getting upgrades, spending our money in some other way other than just adding on more SCVs. One of the things that I think is cool about Zerg, for example, is that those decisions can be made much more dramatically, right? Like you'll see a Zerg player just droning. They're just droning, and they're just droning, and they're just droning. Oh yeah, on the drone train. And then, bam, they spit out a bunch of units, right? Terran doesn't really work that way. Basically, like, I'm always in a situation where I'm creating SCVs. There may be moments in time that require, I really need to cut SCV production so I can really get out a bunch of units right now because something is happening. But usually I feel like something went wrong if I get in that situation. If I'm cutting SCVs, it's because I've got 3 fully saturated mineral lines, and adding more isn't really going to do much more for me. Okay? It's going to start taking away too much of my supply that I can put into army. So, like, the point of that economy is to get out army tech and upgrades, right? So if you can't make more army because all you're doing is making SCVs, then that income is kind of pointless, right? And this is, again, we're talking about efficiency, which I've boiled down to one word, which is profitability. Profitability does not always mean the most income, okay? It doesn't always mean the most revenue, to put it in another word, right? It means I'm getting more out than what I put in, okay? Which is the goal, really, of everything that everybody is doing. And that might sound a little bit funny to you if you haven't thought about things like that. But sorry, this is about to go deep end here. Okay, so the structure of decisions that we make, just in life and in StarCraft, right, is I want to spend as little time or as little money to get some result. Whether that result is more time and money, or is some material thing, or maybe it's something less material. Maybe it's your sense of happiness, or it's a relationship. Like we have our friend Leah here, who has prioritized her career over her personal life, and as a result hasn't had time for a man, but seems to be getting the gears a grinding and fires a blazing for this Gianni Rinaldi fellow. Okay, at least in this particular moment. We don't know where that's going to go, but in order for her to have time to have a profitable relationship with Gianni, if that's where this is going to go, then she might have to make some adjustments, right? Spend her time a little differently to get different results, and that's going to depend on her personal preferences. Okay? So, in order to get more out of the situation, she's going to have to spend something, right? And in order to make sure that that's a good decision, the idea is that Leah is going to get more out of her relationship with Gianni than she would focusing on her career solely. Okay? And by more, I don't just mean money, right? Because obviously, I mean, yeah, Gianni is rich, and you could make some arguments that, you know, her net worth is going to increase and all of that. But take all of that stuff out. Just, you know, she likes the guy. She wants to pull him in for the kiss. All right? And probably take him home with her permanently, right? Maybe. I mean, we can sort of assume that's where it's going to go. All right? Now, to her, that may be a more profitable thing with her life than focusing so much energy on her career. Okay? So, when I say the word profitability, I don't necessarily just mean the obvious, but we're talking about StarCraft. And, you know, in StarCraft, the most profitable thing is winning. Right? We want to win the game. So, we're going to make decisions that lead toward winning. And what we're doing right now is we're exploring the most fundamental qualities and mechanics of the economy. Right? So, efficiency doesn't just mean faster, more, right? Because if you think about that, then you're going to come to the conclusion that I need maximum 24/24 saturation on my mineral line. And that's not what the concept of efficiency is talking about. Okay? So you can't really, you know, what I'm trying to say is that you can't understand those things without getting into the weeds of the fundamental underlying underpinnings, foundation, the structure of the economy itself. Okay? So, we did a little experiment. We found out that our SCVs get somewhere between 40 and 50 minerals per minute, which is about 640 minerals per minute when we have 16 SCVs, which would allow us to do things like build about 4 barracks per minute. Okay? So, in 10 minutes, that would lead you to believe, roughly speaking, not accounting for other variables, roughly speaking, about, oh my goodness, that would imply 40 barracks in 10 minutes, right? Okay? And that's just if that's all you were building. Clearly, in a game of StarCraft, that's not what's happening. You're doing things like building supply depots. You get that barracks up, what are you going to do with that barracks? You're going to build Marines, right? So, you're not going to be just spitting out 40 barracks. Okay? But that potential exists. So where are we going to go next? Where are we going to go next? After I've talked, I don't know, I feel like I just talked about profitability and efficiency for like 10 minutes. 15. Whew! Things are getting hot. Okay. So we got started a little late due to technical difficulties, and I keep looking at the time thinking, oh, I've got to hurry up. But no, we don't need to hurry. We can take our time. We can take it slow. Oh yeah, real slow. As slow as you need. Slow as I want. Alright. So we're in this game. We were looking at our barracks units just to get some data. The build times, the costs, the hidden cost of supply. Alright. Now where do we want to go from here? What do we want to understand? How does this help us, really? Okay? Well, it helps us make decisions. Right? So, for example, okay, I was doing some TVT practice, and I was on the ladder a few days ago, and I started to notice that, wow, I was getting hit with lots of cheese from everybody, and I was also getting a lot of all-ins, not necessarily cheese, but just all-ins. Particularly in TVT, there was like the 1-1-1 all-in, like every TVT. And on the ladder, you can't predict that sort of thing. It's not like playing in a tournament where you might know something about your opponent. You might have watched them play before and seen their tendencies and their style. So, you know, how do you deal with those situations? What kind of decisions can be made? Right? Well, that requires first that we scout and that we get the information. And then what do we do with that information? Okay, so the first part of the process is identifying, okay, this is a cheese. I can expect that there's going to be lots of units thrown at me. Or this is an all-in. I can expect that there's going to be lots of units thrown at me. Now, in order to see that, you know, what we're going to need to do is understand the openings of our opponent, right? The best way to do that is to study other races' builds, or even to do the build yourself. That's probably the best way, is just to practice other races' builds, just so that you can see what it looks like at certain times in the game, and, you know, take notes. Like, at this time, in a 9 pool, there's this much gas that has been mined. Which, by the way, if you didn't know, you can click on resources when you have vision of them, and it'll say, you know, how many resources are left. Or something a little more, you know, concrete and easy to view is that these are the structures, or this structure is halfway complete. That sort of stuff. Take notes on it. Then you can start to build your understanding of your opponent's openers and better identify that cheese or that all-in that's coming. And now we're going to have to make decisions, right? And one of the cool things about IMBA builds is that they've got a really nice follow-up on each build at the end of it about how to transition, what its strengths are, what its weaknesses are, and, you know, ways in which you can manipulate the build to deal with them if you scout. Okay? So that's cool, but what if we don't know that by memory? What if we're just in a game and right now our priority is winning and we just don't know the answer? Well, based on some of these experiments that we're doing here, we can make certain general conclusions. They may not be very concrete, they may not be very they might not be very accurate, right? They may be sort of abstract conclusions, right? But they might help us and we might learn from them. So exploring this stuff through the process of discovery, right, we're going to build a better pool of information to make better decisions from. One of which, right, is that if you haven't yet taken your gas and you see an all-in happening, and you say to yourself, okay, well, I could ramp up my marine production and I could hold this all in, right? I don't need any advanced tech. It's going to take too long to get there. I'm not going to spend any money on upgrades right now because I need to hold off this assault, right? Well, we know that 120 minerals per minute is lost, at least to opportunity cost, when we build a refinery and put 3 SCVs in it, all right? It's actually a little bit more than that because of the cost of the refinery itself. So if it's really early and you get some scouting information, that's the sort of thing to think about. Well, what does that 120 minerals plus the 120 plus 75, what does that really represent? Well, okay, there's, let's do the math. All right. So we've got 120 minerals plus 75 is 195 minerals divided by 50 is 4 Marines. All right. So that decision could, if an attack is coming soon and 4 Marines is going to make the difference, there's an opportunity to make an adjustment and say, I need those 4 Marines right now. I can get my gas a little bit later and transition into the same build that I was actually going to do. It's just going to take a different route getting there. And what I mean by the same build is I don't mean like, Reaper Fast expand versus, 2 Barracks expand. What I mean is that, like, as a Terran player, for example, we're looking for a certain configuration of infrastructure at a particular moment in time, which is far into the future, right? Like, we're looking to make a 10-minute push, specifically against Protoss, for example, with a couple of medevacs, a handful of Marauders, and a bunch of Marines. And, we're going to have STEM, Concussive Shell, and +1 attack, at least. Like, that's sort of the minimum that I'm looking to achieve. And, that's usually going to look like 5 barracks, a factory, and a starport with a reactor on it, right? By 10 minutes or so. And then, you start to do things like follow up with a 3rd command center, flush out, get a 2nd engineering bay, things like that. All right. So there's a lot of build orders to get you there, to that, 5 barracks, a factory, and a starport, and some upgrades. There's lots of build orders that get you there. And what I'm trying to present here is a really, really basic way of looking at decisions to find our way to there despite anything that might happen in the meantime. Because if you're scouting for a purpose, right? You're not just scouting because somebody told you so, right? It's a great thing to do, but for what reason? What reason is scouting good? It's so that you know what your opponent is trying to do. And why is that good? It's so that we can disrupt what our opponent is trying to do or completely prevent it from being effective, right? Now, what if our build order isn't going to allow that to happen? What if our build order is actually playing right into our opponent's hands? Are you just going to keep doing that build order and say, well, I got unlucky. It was a coin flip and I lost. No, okay? Right? That is not cool with me. I'm not okay with that. And I mean, I'm not much of a StarCraft player, and that's not okay with me. Right? What I'm trying to do is to illustrate that there are decisions to be made, and we need to understand the fundamentals. So I'm learning the fundamentals, and I'm sharing that process with you so that we can be better StarCraft players together. Right? This is the kind of thinking, this is the kind of analysis where you might not have thought about the game this way, particularly if you're new or particularly if you're struggling in the lower end of the ladder, right? Now, you might say to yourself, oh, well, what good is thinking about the game like this to me right now? Well, and I'd agree with you. Right now, if you're like me, your biggest focus should probably be on creating as many units as you possibly can as fast as you can. Right. So, in other words, your macro game, right? If you're Gold League or lower, it's probably a macro thing, okay? Which is where I'm at. So why am I spending cycles thinking about the fundamentals of the economy? Well, because I'm starting to get to that point where, at least for the first 10 to 15 minutes of the game, my macro is getting more solid. I know where my macro weaknesses are now. I'm practicing those things. So I know that with the practice and the time, my macro is on track to be where it needs to be. So that means I have some more mental cycles to think about other things to improve in the future. And one of those things is decision making. Okay, I've noticed watching my replays that some of my decision making doesn't make sense to me after the fact, right? That's a really awkward place to be. For example, like I have an army, I built it up for that moment in time. It should go be aggressive, and it's sitting there. Why is it sitting there? Okay. Now, a more experienced player is going to look at that and be like, dude, you need to go be aggressive. And I'm like, yes, I totally agree. You're not telling me anything I don't know right now. I know that very much, and I knew that then, but something happened. Some piece of information or some action I needed to take took my attention elsewhere. And it felt more important at the time, right? That's the important thing to realize is like, okay, you can act in ignorance, which is like an army sitting there not doing anything, and you just don't know that you should be more aggressive. Okay, you don't know that your opponent is weak, relatively speaking, right? You just don't know. Like that's inaction via ignorance, right? But then you have times when you have information and you know that attacking now would be really good, but then some other piece of information comes along and you're like, I need to take care of that right now, right? So that's a question of decision making and priority, right? Do I really need to like spend too much time laying down my third, transferring SCVs, building force supply depots, and then going and attacking? No. Maybe not. Maybe not. Right? So, in order to make the best decisions, we need to start with a good foundation. And getting a good foundation means getting into the weeds, getting in there and knowing your economy, and knowing the build times, knowing the costs, being able to identify things like supply cost, right? How that's going to impact your economy in the short term. You know, in a scenario like that is really early game, for example. Like think about this. Think about a Protoss that has done something super hyper aggressive with stalkers real early, right? You know, most of the time as Terran, I feel like my Protoss opponents are just hanging out trying to survive and until they get their late game army. But every now and again, you as that Terran will play that Protoss that, you know, they think they're MC and they're being all aggro with their stalkers real super early. Well, we know Marauders are good against stalkers. Okay. We know Marines can be pretty bad against stalkers because of the range problem, right? The stalker can trade with Marines a little better if the micro is on point. Okay. So I've got like 2 barracks though at this point. Maybe I've got a third, and I'm working on my starport. I don't know. But generally speaking, like most builds say, you know, don't build your Marauders until your starport's done, right? Because the build order was highly optimized to get gas to afford the structures that you needed, and building Marauders would take away from that. Some other builds might not have that requirement, but I've seen a few that do. So do you just keep pumping out Marines? Do you switch to Marauders even though your medevacs aren't out yet? Those are difficult questions to answer when you don't understand the fundamental economics at play. And I don't have an answer for that question right now, right? I tend to just pump out Marines. Why? Because I can get them out faster. And when I'm dealing with early aggression, when I can get a thing out faster, I feel more comfortable. Whether it's actually more effective, I'm not sure yet. Is it more efficient? I really can't answer that yet, right? So you got to think about things in terms of both their efficiency and their efficacy, right? How effective it is versus how efficient it is, and getting just enough to get through and move forward, right? So let's wrap up today with a little more of Leah's seduction. We'll close out there. And then I'm going to take a break, and I'm probably going to do some laddering this afternoon, and I'll do it on stream. And I'm going to be doing the whole like laddering and trying to win bit which is a little different than Ladder Like a Hero, where I ladder with the intent to improve. So it's a little different kind of a thing. I don't talk quite as much because I'm trying to focus on execution. But I'm making my push toward gold, and I'd like you to hang out with me. It's a good time. It's fun. And we're going to do that. But first, we need to check in on Leah's seduction. Not that it meant anything. Of course it didn't. He was at the top of the list of eligible bachelors in the New York fashion world. And a hunk she wouldn't soon forget. But Leah wasn't even in his league. He was wealthy, having built a successful business while still in his mid-20s. She was clinging to a starting position in the industry. Even worse was that he had his pick of women. In the fashion scene, there was no shortage of them. Leah was presentable, but not striking. Or so she envisioned. And she was a subpar dresser, considering her career choice. For once she wished she wasn't so inept with makeup and hair, as then she might have made a better impression on Gianni. Since it was her one and only private meeting, so to speak, Leah had lost her chance. But she couldn't push his image out of her mind, and she couldn't forget those blue-gray eyes. So thank you for joining me today for episode 3 of Cheap Love, where we explore economic relationships, setting the tone with the hottest in romantic fiction, and getting our fix of the weeds and all of the cool economic relationships within a game of StarCraft. We're starting out on the fundamentals, and I've had a lot of fun presenting the idea of exploring and discovering knowledge rather than just trying to memorize it all. And we're going to be doing more of that in next week's episode of Cheap Love. I'm going to say this on camera. Not this week, but the next week, right after Thanksgiving, something like that. I'm going to do some prep work, and we're going to do some build orders. We're going to create our own build orders, rough and bad, on stream in an episode of Brain and Body. Okay, because I want to explore what that looks like, so that we can learn more about the process of reacting to information we see. Now that I think about it, this is the longest outro yet. But now that I think about it, I think what we're going to do is we're going to demonstrate on the next Brain and Body how to learn other races' timings, right? And we're going to do that by just executing some builds for other races. And we're going to do that poorly, but we're going to keep going at it until we get a good representation, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So tomorrow, what is tomorrow? Tuesday. Tomorrow is Tuesday. Tomorrow is Brain and Body episode 3. And that's what we are going to do. So thank you so much. I hope you've enjoyed episode 3 of Cheap Love, and I hope you're also enjoying the story of Leah and her interactions with Gianni. Thanks again. Have a good afternoon. I'll be back in a little while for some laddering. Oh yeah.